you want to share one leadership development practice that your organization does that you're really excited about, you can chat those as well. Uh, and again, a quick note. If you joined in as one of the many Eric Braxtons, I see we seem to have less of them now, but if you joined as one of the many Eric Braxtons, if you wouldn't mind logging out and logging in, Fuse recently sent you a unique email with your unique login. I see we have lots of folks joining. Really thrilled to have you all here. Uh, if you want to, again, please introduce yourself. Let us know your name and your organization, where you're from, and one leadership development practice that you have that you're really excited about. We have over, as I said, we have almost 200 people that registered for this webinar, so it'll make it difficult to do a lot of conversation. So we want to use the chat feature as much as possible to engage. So please, keep your questions and comments and introductions and thoughts coming over the chat. All right, so we'll please keep the introductions coming. Um, uh, if I see some people having a little bit of difficulty, you should have just received your own personal login from Fuse. If you didn't, you're welcome to stay on as another Eric Braxton. Just mute yourself because so that we don't catch background noise. But again, sorry for the technical difficulty and glad to have so many of you here. I'm going to go ahead and get started now. And again, I really want to thank everyone for joining our first Youth Core webinar, the release of our Leadership Pipeline Toolkit. Again, my name is Eric Braxton. I'm the director of the Funders Collaborative on Youth Organizing. Before I came to FCYO, I was the founder and director of a youth organizing group called the Philadelphia Student Union. And we're really excited to have so many people here for our first webinar. We're thrilled to see so many registrations and great to see so many familiar names and new names that are popping up on the introductions. Feel free to use the chat to give shout outs to your friends that are there. We want to make it as an engaging a space as possible. The Leadership Pipeline Toolkit is the culmination of years of work and lessons drawn from many of your groups, and we hope that it will be a really useful tool for all of your organizations. But before we get into that, this being the first Youth Core webinar, I would just like to say a little bit about Youth Core. So FCYO has always been committed to supporting stronger and more sustainable youth organizing field. In the past, we've mostly done this through regranting, funder advocacy, and research and publications that spread the word about youth organizing. But Youth Core is a little bit different and a little bit of something new for us. Rather than a regranting program that focuses on a small subset of groups, the goal is to build a stronger and more stable youth organizing field by creating regular opportunities to bring together a large number of youth organizing groups to learn from each other and develop shared strategy. We really believe that right now is a crucial moment for youth organizing, from police accountability to school discipline to immigration and climate change. Low-income young people and young people of color are on the forefront of social justice movements on a variety of issues. And so we hope that Youth Core will be a space that will connect some of the different forms of youth organizing that are emerging in this moment to develop shared strategy and to build overall a more powerful movement. Um, there are three main topics that Youth Core will address. The first is building strong and sustainable organizations, and this could include fundraising, financial management, board development, and alternative organizational models. The second is supporting individual young leaders, which could include leadership development, meeting young leaders' basic needs while they organize, alumni support, and other things like that. The third topic is building and expanding power, which could include things like building shared strategy, into how to integrate voter engagement into organizing work, learning from other movements, and communication strategy. So those are the kinds of topics that we hope Youth Corps will address. There are a number of different programs that will be part of Youth Corps, but the primary ones are an annual national youth organizing convening, the first of which will be in the fall of 2015. The second is these regular webinars, which we hope to do every other month and will address a variety of topics, including the kinds of topics I just mentioned. And then finally, later in the year, we'll launch some peer learning circles where a set of groups with a shared learning goal can learn from other groups that have developed some best practices. So overall, we hope that Youth Corps will really be a space that will bring together lots of your groups to learn from each other, to build shared strategy, and ultimately to build increased power for the youth organizing movement. But I also want to say that FCYO will continue to do the funder advocacy and research and publications that we've done since we began. So that's a little bit about Youth Corps. Now I want to introduce Janelle Ishida from the Movement Strategy Center, who helped develop the Leadership Pipeline Toolkit and will be our main presenter on this webinar. Janelle started youth organizing during the Proposition 21 and 22 campaigns in California and organized for 10 years with Californians for Justice. She's now working as an associate with the Movement Strategy Center and doing capacity building work with youth organizing groups. So we're really lucky to have her with us today. And at this point, I will turn it over to Janelle.
Thanks so much, Eric. So I want to thank everyone for being on this webinar today. Like Eric said, we're really excited to share the toolkit out with people and then also to kick off this Youth Corps initiative. So Eric and I both come from youth organizing backgrounds. I think our ideal way of sharing this toolkit would probably be in, an interactive in-person thing with free food and probably some really old couches and lots of great dialogue and discussion. But since we're here in webinar land, we are going to make the most out of what we have. And so that really means that we want to encourage people to engage throughout the webinar through the chat space. So you'll see an option to open that up in your window. And so hopefully everyone has that chat window open. You can see some instructions on this slide in terms of how to do it. And we really want to have a robust side conversation. So sort of the opposite of a one mic rule. We hope to have many mics, but just through the chat. So because of the large number of participants, we won't be doing open phone lines, but for folks who are calling in and who aren't on the Fuse platform, you can tweet your questions to us. So we are at _FCYO. So folks want to engage via Twitter. If you're not on the Fuse platform, that's another way to do it. So again, this is going to be recorded, so we'll be able to share that out with people even outside of this webinar space. And then we'll also be hopefully taking whatever questions and ideas, knowledge that's shared from the participants on this webinar, and putting together sort of an addendum to the training based off of some of the things that people share out through the chat. So we really encourage you to, bring your own experiences and learnings to the space as we go. What else? We'll be breaking every 5 minutes or so to take questions. So it will definitely be interactive, and we want to keep people on their toes. So, wow, the slides are really. Is everyone seeing this? The slides kind of flying by. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, the slides have a mind of their own, but we are going to try to keep them back in order. So over the next hour, what we're really going to do is present the leadership pipeline framework. So this is really the foundation of the entire toolkit. And so Eric's going to take us through that a little bit. And that was developed through the ReGenerations grantee initiative that happened a few years ago. And then we'll walk folks through a couple of the key pieces of the leadership pipeline toolkit, the curriculum that's in there, some of the resources and best practices that we captured. And then finally, we'll have some voices from the field. So we're actually going to hear a little case study from Inner City Struggle out in LA about how they've integrated the academic support for their young people, really closely connecting that with the core organizing work that they're doing around educational justice issues. So that said, We are now going to, I guess I'm going to pass it over back to Eric, who's going to share a little bit about this framework that we developed.
Great, thank you very much. So yeah, let me now say a little bit about how the leadership pipeline framework came to be and how this toolkit got started. So uh, in 2010, FCYO did a national field scan of over 150 youth organizing groups from all across the country. And the scan identified a need to support young people's holistic development and their ability to stay connected to social justice as they get older. one I remember one youth organizing ED during that scan that said basically, I thought really summed this up well. And she said, how do we address the fact that our young people are on TV and meeting with the mayor one day and standing on the corner and not able to get a job the next day? Other people were more focused on how do we ensure that all of these amazing young leaders that are coming through youth organizing groups stay involved in social justice for the long haul and that they're able to meet their own goals, whether that's going to college or getting work or whatever it is. How do we really support their development as they're doing this organizing? So in response to those kinds of questions, FCYO started and designed the Leadership Pipeline Initiative in order to, one, to develop a framework for a comprehensive social justice leadership pipeline, and two, to support 20 youth organizing groups from all across the country to strengthen their supports for young people. And so we brought on the Movement Strategy Center as the capacity building provider for this initiative. And so our framework, which you can see up on the slide there, uh, uh, it focuses on how youth organizing groups can be the entry point in a pipeline that builds a regenerating base of leaders for social justice movement. So the pipeline starts in middle school and high school, very different than when some people talk about a social justice pipeline. It often starts in college or something like that. So we were very clear that it needs to start in middle school and high school with an explicit focus on low-income young people and young people of color. And it supports young people's development as leaders and as healthy and whole people. It includes developing strong organizing groups as well as creating deliberate agreements with a variety of partner institutions that can be like stepping stones and a clear roadmap for people to continue their leadership as they get older. And so finally, it builds an intentional pathway to employment, education, and continued social justice involvement. So the structure of the pipeline is defined by the three stages that you see there. So first, there's an entry stage where young people are first recruited to programs or activities that introduce them to organizing work. Next is the development stage, in which young people build their political consciousness and skills through curriculum and hands-on activities and organizing and reflection. And then last is this transition phase, which supports them to make plans as they go on to the next stage in their lives and so that they can stay involved in social justice wherever they go. The last thing I want to say about the framework is that our idea of the leadership pipeline is both about training the next generation of organizers and political leaders, but also that young people can take their values and their leadership wherever they go. So we need social justice organizers and political leaders, but we also need social justice union members and hairdressers and parents. The idea is that we're building leaders and we're building a progressive constituency, and that everybody can take these values and skills wherever it is that they go and meet their goals. So that's a little bit of an overview about the leadership pipeline framework. Let's stop now and ask for your questions, which you can again either chat us or you can tweet them to us at _FCYO. So we'd love any questions or comments or clarifications about the leadership pipeline framework.
Great. And I forgot to mention that we actually have Rachel Burrows and Will Buford, staff from MSC and FCYO, who are managing our, chat space. So they'll be sort of the voices to your questions that you're chatting in. So at this point, I guess Rachel or Will, if you have anything that you want to voice up for Eric to answer.
I'll just recognize one
Mhm.
question that I saw here, which is, are the alumni tracking systems still being implemented? So we didn't, as part of the Leadership Pipeline Initiative, there was one of the learning circles that we'll talk about did focus on alumni support. And so a number of groups have had different experiences and experiments around alumni tracking. We didn't have an overall alumni tracking system. There's another piece of work that's really exciting, which is the learning to lead work that Veronica Tarica out of USC, the study that they did over 1,500 youth organizing alumni from California. That's the most comprehensive study of youth organizing alumni that I know of. One of the things that we'll be talking about a possible follow-up is, would some kind of alumni tracking system that more groups can use be a useful tool? Is that something FCYO could help create? Would more groups want to use that? So we don't have one system for alumni tracking.
I think there's a question about the overall kind of vision for, I think maybe the question is specific to the funders collaborative on youth organizing, the unifying social justice vision of the work.
Yeah, I mean, FCYO has always been focused on supporting the leadership of young people who have been most impacted by social inequity. So our basic belief is that low-income young people and young people of color need to be the primary leaders in addressing the issues that are facing them in their communities. And I think the organizations that we work, so we have a commitment to social justice, we have a commitment to racial justice, but we also haven't wanted to create one statement, because we know that people approach these issues from very different places, have different ways of what social justice means to them. So we didn't have any kind of sort of litmus test of what, we allowed people to really define what does social justice mean for them and their communities.
So then there's a question about, how do you promote long-term engagement from youth populations when they're such a transient population? And then Jonathan had a specific question about measuring long-term engagement.
Yeah, those are great questions. And I think that the question of how do we support long-term engagement, I think, is a great one. I'd love to turn that back to other people on the call, and please, chat back. What have you figured out about supporting long-term engagement of young people? I think some of the lessons that we learned from the Leadership Pipeline Toolkit, from the Leadership Pipeline Initiative, were that, one, we think that engaging young people in developing a critical analysis of the root causes of problems in their communities helped lead to their long-term commitment to social justice. When young people have opportunities to truly organize around the issues in their neighborhoods and win meaningful campaigns, that those and build strong relationships with their peers and with adults, those are the things that often kept people engaged for the long haul. Where we often had challenges were after young people are graduating from high school and they're no longer young people, how do we really keep them involved after that? And that's where we hope this Leadership Pipeline Toolkit will be valuable. And measuring it, I think is really challenging. But I would point to the work that the Learning to Lead study and other things like that have looked at, large numbers of young people who participated in youth organizing and how are they still active in their communities. And there were some really tremendous findings that came out of that study that it's a story that hasn't been well told yet, and one that I think we want to tell, that young people who do participate in youth organizing do seem to be taking all kinds of leadership in their neighborhoods, their communities.
Lots of rich dialogue on chat about the alumni questions and tracking long-term youth engagement. I'm going to actually have us move along in the agenda to keep us on track with time, but I imagine we'll come back to some of these questions.
Great.
Thank you, Rachel. And so for folks who are looking at, the chat space, when you see anything coming from Rachel Burrows, she's going to try to put it in caps, but we're going to pose some questions to participants as we sort of go through their presentation. So feel free to keep sharing your experiences and learnings through the chat space. So at this point, we are going to transition into actually looking into the toolkit itself. So digging into that big PDF. Hopefully, you've downloaded it from the FCYO website. If not, I think Rachel will send the link out now through chat, or you can also see it at the top of this slide right here. So the way that the toolkit is organized, there's these four main sections that you can see here. So there's a staff framework curriculum, and then you've got the youth transitions piece, best practices, tools, and tips. And the way that the toolkit, kind of to backtrack a little bit, came about is that over the course of the initiative, it became clear that while many organizations had, these really refined models for various stages of the pipeline that Eric just talked about, the realities of staffing constraints, campaign pressures, and other factors left a lot of folks less able to focus on that final stage, that transition stage of helping their youth leaders into opportunities beyond high school, into movement spaces or career spaces or college spaces. And so the idea was that this toolkit was put together to really provide curriculum and tools for groups interested in improving, their work at each stage of the pipeline, but with a specific focus for that final transition point. So we want to, at this time, just thank the folks that helped to contribute to this. So Ingrid Benedict and Carmen Iniguez, who are both with Movement Strategy Center, were two of the staff that were part of the initial initiative and holding that cohort of folks together, and also authored and reviewed the curriculum that's part of the toolkit. We also wanted to thank the initiative grantee partners themselves and the original Repia block transitions training that Movement Strategy Center created with Soul and Kids First. So a lot of the curriculum that you'll see in the youth transitions portion of the toolkit is that block curriculum. So some of you might be familiar with it and have hopefully used it in your own work in the past. So with that said, let's get into the actual staff curriculum. So you can see on this slide, there's the idea behind the curriculum is that the pieces are kind of modular. So the idea is that you could take any of the activities that were created, these sessions that were created, edit it, use it, and incorporate it for your own work as you see fit. And so there's a bunch of different activities. You can package them all together into like a giant 2.5-hour staff training, or you could just take them out one at a time, and they're standalone activities that can help to advance your thinking and work along the leadership pipeline. So that's one piece of it. Then there's another piece that is a standalone sort of reveal your hidden leadership pipeline piece, which looks at it from a sort of organizational case study moment, almost, of how your staff came to the point that they are at right now. And we'll get into that in a little more detail as we go on. So let's see. So what we're going to do now is just kind of lift up a few of the pieces of curriculum and talk you through it, some of the highlights that we see from this curriculum, what we like about it. And then hopefully as we're doing this, you can also flip through that PDF, or if you've printed it out, the physical packet. So the first training that we wanted to talk about is reflecting on leadership development. So what I really like about this session is that it anchors the conversation in a larger vision of where we want, what do we see as the end goal of the leadership development work that we're doing in our organization, and really building staff consensus around that vision. So oftentimes I think we assume that everyone has a shared analysis, a shared understanding of what all the pieces of our work are building towards, but allowing staff the space to articulate that and then find the common ground in that vision is actually a really powerful place to start. And so what this particular session does is it creates a space to evaluate your current leadership development model, and then also engages staff in a question of what will it take? What will it take to get us to that vision that we can all see? And really that is the bulk of what we're trying to do through the rest of this toolkit, is help folks go from, I can critique my current model, I can name where I think, we want to help our young people get to, but how do we connect, point A to point B? So the next piece that we'll talk about is the leadership pipeline framework. And so Eric went through and kind of explained it, how it works as a framework. And one of the things that we did with the staff trainings overall was trying to build in multiple methods of learning and sharing. And so this session uses image theater to capture people's personal experiences with the pipeline. So again, from sort of a popular education kind of methodology, we're really trying to lift up people's personal experiences of our staff in their thinking and conversation as a team about what the leadership pipeline could look like for your organization. So the another piece of this training is that we did a really, or this session of the training is that doing a really detailed inventory of your current work in each stage of the pipeline so that everyone, even if they maybe work on this one slice of your program area, everyone's able to see the full wheel of the leadership development work that you provide to young people. Um, and then the two other components that I like from this session is that there's a pulse check just to see, from each person's individual perspective, what do they see as the priority stage of the pipeline for the organization to invest its time and energy. So which of those stages do they feel from a personal perspective is really, where it's at? And so from this little pulse check kind of moment, it's helpful to see how your staff sort of position themselves along that pipeline so that if you're thinking about how do we move our organization, you can see what are the people sort of self desires or their personal motivations, and where do they match up best along that pipeline. And so then the last piece of this training is just looking at contrasting the breakdown of actual staff time. So if everyone says, we really believe that, focusing on helping young people transition successfully is where it's at. And that is like the key piece of this pipeline that we need to, do. Then let's step back and take a moment of saying, well, actually, where are we spending our time? And so doing a mapping of how much time are we spending in each of these chunks of the pipeline? And therefore, do we have alignment with what we see as the priority, or do things need to shift? And so that opportunity to sort of contrast our desires with the actual program work on the ground is a good check-in moment. So the next piece in the staff training series is called Walking Our Talk. So again, this is on page 9 if you're trying to follow through the curriculum. And this session is really like get down and dirty work planning. So it uses this IMAP framework. You'll see it again in the youth transitions curriculum. It came out of that original block training curriculum that was developed. And what we found at MSC is that it's a really powerful way of thinking about personal change or organizational change so that you can set sort of a short-term goal and think about, what is the theory of change that I'm using to achieve this? What are the roles that staff or young people need to play for us to get there? What are the vehicles and communities? And by that, we mean vehicles could be, structures. So we need to create like a youth program committee if we want young people to feel more invested in driving the program work of our organization, or we want to have young people represented on the board. So what are the actual structural ways that we lift up youth leadership within the organization? And then finally, all of those things combined, you still need to acknowledge that change takes time and there needs to be a support system or a support network in place for that real, check-in points, course correction, and accountability to take place for the change to happen. Let's go to the final. So the final thing that I wanted to highlight from the staff portion of this toolkit is the Reveal Your Hidden Leaderships Pipeline. So this one is a standalone session that you could do with your staff. That what I really like about it is that it allows your staff to sort of name how they arrived at where they are right now. And so it maps out for you very visually what were the different, organizational moments, the relationship moments, and the structural kind of pieces of their own journey that allowed them to get to where they are now, and sort of using themselves as a case study and using your staff as a case study to reflect on how are we making that path much more, fluid and walkable for the young people that we're working with. So it's a really great opportunity to kind of learn from our own lived experience. And then second, it introduces the organizational change spectrum, which is what you'll see here in the slide. It's a really simple grid, but it's actually really powerful in when we've used it with organizations, because what it does is it allows people to capture like that brilliance of like the staff moment. I've got all these great ideas, right? And it's inspiring, and it takes those ideas and puts them into this really simple chart that allows you to think about, okay, so we want to move to point B. We have to acknowledge where our capacity is at in order to make that change work, possible. So if you take your ideas and kind of put them into this flow of gradual change, intermediate change, and transformative change, you can allow yourself as an organization to say like, okay, well, given our capacity right now, we acknowledge that that transformational moment is necessary for us to reach our end goal. But given our capacity, we know that we want to start here with, what we listed out under gradual. Or like, hey, we've got this space and there is this opening and we've got the capacity. So we're going to take on work that we see as intermediate change. And so it just allows everyone to hold the vision of where they want to go, but align the work on the ground to where their capacity is at as an organization. So at this point, we are going to, again, break for questions. We ran through that section of the toolkit pretty quickly. So if folks have questions, again, chat them in, or if you are on the phone lines, you can use Twitter, as we said before. So I will pause for people to catch up on chat or for Rachel to share out what she sees.
Let's see. It looks like people are going through the curriculum pretty closely, page by page. So I'm not seeing any specific questions coming through right now. If I've missed one, please send it our way again.
Or Eric, if you had any other things that you wanted to point out from the section.
Yeah. I would just highlight in general that one of the things that we think is useful about this curriculum is this staff curriculum. In the past, we've had the curriculums that people can use with their members, but the idea of really having a tool for staff to go and look at your organization, at your own internal leadership pipeline. Where is it strong? Where can it be strengthened? This is really a new piece of work. It was something that we did in detail with the leadership pipeline grantees, and we think they found it really useful to use this framework to go back and look at where their strengths were and where they wanted to grow. I think many people, the tools that we have for working with young leaders may not be that new to folks, but I think this piece is new and really valuable.
So we've got two more questions coming in that I want to highlight, and then these will be our last two questions before we move on. One question from Felicia is around who leads an organization and the organization staff through the framework curriculum. What have we seen in practice? And then a question about a little bit more on the organizational change spectrum, context for engaging in it.
I mean, I can speak from my own experience. I don't know, Eric, if you have any anecdotes of what you've seen in terms of people who in the organization would be best suited. I mean, from my own experience, I would say, someone who probably has some general overview and understanding of the current leadership development work or the youth program work in your organization would be well suited to do this. And then obviously, if the end goal is to create any sort of programmatic changes within the organization, I think it's important to have those conversations with, whatever the leadership team or the management team, whoever those people are in your organization, so that you're not just opening up a conversation that doesn't then have the organizational supports to move forward the action items, right? So you want to make sure that if we are going to open this up to really be reflective and intentional, that we have the commitment from our organizational leadership to make whatever, changes that people flag possible. Eric, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I think that's great. Do you want to? I think you spoke to that well. Do you want to talk about the question about the organizational change spectrum?
Yeah, sorry, Rachel. What was did they have a specific question about it?
I think it was about more context.
just the context that you might use that tool in. I mean, I think that this tool is actually something that is exciting to me, and I don't think it's necessary that it has to happen within connected to any particular part of your program work. I mean, it could be like your youth program work. I think it could be related to any sort of organizational change that you're hoping to make. And for me, it's a really simple grid, but again, what I like about it is that, like I said, it kind of helps you to capture a brainstorm of ideas and categorize them in terms of what is the capacity that it would take you to make those possible. So actually, in the best practices section at the end of the toolkit, you'll see that each of the organizations that we did case studies of filled this organizational change spectrum out related to doing mental health supports or doing alumni engagement or doing academic support. So when Jeanette does their presentation on for ICS, you'll see a preview of it as well. So it can help you to think about how you might use it in your own work, both in terms of thinking out practices, and then you'll also see their systems. So again, with doing organizational change, it's really important to not just think of a standalone practice, but how you really can create systems that will keep these practices integrated and really embedded in the life work that's already existing in your organization.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think it's useful to be realistic about, we often do these assessments of our organizations and then we think, oh, wow, we want to make these big changes. But do we take the time to really look at realistically, what do we have the capacity to do? Is this a moment in our organization where we're really ready to overhaul the way that we do, our leadership development support? And so we really want to, or you know what, we got a lot going on. We have a big campaign right now. But we can do this one small practice, right? And so we really encourage people to be, as you look at your internal leadership pipeline, be realistic about what level of change you have the capacity to make. And it isn't that it's not right at every moment to do an overhaul of your curriculum, So I think that's what I find useful about that tool.
Yeah, for sure. And again, going on that tip, I know we're running a little behind, but what I like about this is that it allows you to capture those really big heart, big vision ideas in that transformative column and just kind of hold them there, like hold them there, look at them, but be like, okay, we know that's where we want to go, but realistically, we're going to start here in this like gradual change column or the intermediate change column. So it holds those ideas and keeps them in everyone's hearts and minds, but then allows you to be realistic about your capacity. So Rachel is our awesome question moderator and timekeeper, says move along. So we are going to jump into the next section of the toolkit, which is the youth transitions curriculum. And again, I just want to give props to the Repia Block curriculum. It's pretty much, everything that's in there was the original Repia Block curriculum. We just sort of smoothed it out and helped to connect it to this framework a little more closely. So you can see they have a couple of different ways that you can, again, put those different pieces, those modular activities together to create like 2.5-hour training blocks. So that's that slide right there. And then let's see the next one. So I'm going to just choose a couple of the activities from this youth transitions curriculum to highlight for everyone on this webinar. The first one is this body life map. I think a lot of folks have actually used this. This is the one that I've seen maybe the most from the original Repia Block curriculum. And it's an opportunity for participants to really open up and connect with each other, especially if you have folks coming from diverse backgrounds. The questions that are listed here are really personal, then allow people to reflect on, what has shaped them in their own lives, and naming those experiences, those people, what they've seen, what they've, felt, and then also allows them to vision forward. So, this is what has shaped me, but this is actually where I want to go. So it's a really powerful activity. And, if you can dedicate a significant amount of time to it, I've seen that when students are able to each person share out their body or life map, it gets really deep and intimate for folks. So making sure that you have good group agreements before you do this activity is important. So the next piece is roles and communities. So this is a reference to that original IMAP diagram that we showed on the earlier staff slide. And again, that's basically the heart of the framework for change that we're using throughout the youth curriculum and the staff curriculum. And so this activity just helps students to think about roles and communities that they're connected to in a way that brings forth a feeling of abundance rather than scarcity. So instead of coming at it from that angle, you're able to name, here are all the ways, all the roles, many roles that I take on in my life, and all the communities that I'm actually connected to and a part of. So it's a good foundation for starting that conversation. The next piece that I wanted to flag was, it's actually two different pieces. One is the theory of change, and the second is the individual goals. And so with the theory of change activity, I think young people are at a point in their life where they're trying to figure out, what is my theory of change? Like, how do I see the world and how do I believe change happens? And so we do a 4 corners activity, which is, each of the corners is, agree, disagree, strongly agree, strongly disagree. And so you read statements, and then the youth are able to self-select, which of those statements feels more or less true to them. And it's really an opportunity to get some good dialogue going about just how people see the world, and seeing the diversity of perspectives that come out from your youth. And then the second activity that I highlighted here is the goal setting piece. And so that's what you see, that little screenshot on the slide here. It's a pretty simple worksheet, but what I like about it is that, it names not only the goals, but also the support needed, the obstacles maybe standing in your way, and get students to think about, or the young people that you're working with, not only like their short term or, intermediate term goals, but also like really this is where we start planting um, very, very deliberately, where do you see yourself in the movement beyond this organization when you graduate 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Like Eric said earlier, you can go into whatever career it is that you're going to go into, whatever path that you go into, but how do you see yourself still connected with these values that brought you to where you are right now? So then we kind of get to that same IMAP diagram that we used before in the staff training, and helps folks to think about, what are the vehicles that are going to get me there? What are the roles that I need to step up to play within the organization? And those could be, I want to facilitate our next youth curriculum piece, or I want to actually sign up and be a presenter at that workshop that's coming up. So thinking about really specific roles that will get them to their short-term goals, as well as, the same thing as we talked about before. So support that they need. And one thing that I wanted to highlight from this piece that I really liked is that we really encouraged the young people to think about how their efforts to reach a short-term goal will actually lift all boats. So the quote that we use is, it's not how high you climb, but how many people you bring with you. So this idea about collectivity and collective power, collective efforts, what are the ripple effects of their personal change goals, and who else will benefit? And so taking that sort of community approach to personal goal setting and personal change, so that they can ground it in something that's more than just like an individual framework, but really a community framework. Uh, and I think at this point we will pause for questions. So again, we rolled through a lot of curriculum really quickly, and I will see what Rachel has for us and see what you all want to chat in.
I'm not seeing any questions coming through right now. I also want to encourage folks to feel free to share resources as well via chat.
Definitely. So yeah, we are running a little behind, and I definitely want to get ICS on the line here. So maybe what we'll do, if folks do have questions about the piece of the curriculum, chat them in, and like we said earlier, if we can respond back to people and post that up through the FCYO website, we will. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and chat those in. And so what I want to do now is just get to the best practices. And so we had these 4 organizations that you see here on the slide: Inner City Struggle, Community Coalition, the Philadelphia Student Union, and CHIRLA, all led a teacher learner circle. So there was, one element of their work that people felt was like really cutting edge, really amazing. And we used that as an opportunity to share that model out and do some peer learning within the cohort. And so what we're going to see right now from Jeanette and Inner City Struggle is a glimpse at what that teacher learner circle covered for the grantees. So at this point, Jeanette, if you can, there you are. Turn on the video feed and unmute yourself, and then I'm going to pass it over for your slides. There you go.
And first of all, this has been really, really awesome and informative. I'm learning a lot and excited about especially the curriculum. But just in terms of our work here at Inner City Struggle, we focus on a model that we call the holistic leadership development. And sorry, I didn't give a little bit of the background of the organization, but we're located in East Los Angeles, and we service around 88 core youth, and around 6 different high schools. So, but with our academic services and support, our main goal is to provide the academic services that are very scarce in our local high schools, and to make sure that students are supported to not only graduate high school, but to enter places of higher institution, while also supporting students, organize at the local level for more resources and for educational justice at their own schools. So really just getting into the benefits of having an academic services component. Again, it's really important because some of our students go to schools where the teacher to counselor ratio is like 1 to 500 or like 1 to 800. So a lot of the times our academics services support system or component is their first go-to space for receiving these academic support systems. And then again, it's really around retaining our membership, ensuring that our core leaders enter college. Also, for us, it's building strong support network with our parents and families, and also with the local teacher allies and faculty and counselors, so that we're sort of not working as an independent entity, but we're also working at the school site level and engaging with students, counselors, and building those relationships. So again, sort of what we provide to our youth leaders specifically. So we do one-on-one academic advising to ensure that students are getting their college, what we call A through G courses. We also have both actually a senior prep program and a junior prep program that that supports students at whatever grade level they're in, to sort of prep them again for college. And we just launched a junior prep program, I think over a year ago, to get them early, right? Get them started early. And then we also support our undocumented students in getting resources, scholarships to ensure that there are resources to sort of overcome that also barrier to attain higher education. And then, there are also just sort of these other direct services that we provide, like the computer labs, books. We also have, math tutors. So we sort of, and then homework hours, so we do the direct sort of tutoring and, sort of just the direct services here at our space. And yeah, like I mentioned, we service around 88 youth. And then we have 2 advisors, and then we also have our site organizers who support our students to create these individual empowerment plans. And what's really important about our work is, and why we call it a holistic leadership development, is because we are intentional about being in a conversation with one another, whether you're a site organizer supporting students with their leadership skills, or an academic advisor supporting a student with, their academic empowerment plan. As staff, we're in conversation with each other, on a weekly basis around what students we're checking in with, what the pulse is, and that's also really helpful to get a bigger picture. Yeah, and I think this last slide kind of covers things that I already mentioned. Again, the college application process is really important for us. We hold office hours here to give students more of that one-on-one support. Some of the lessons, I guess, some of the lessons learned is really setting aside resources just because it really requires a lot of energy, resources from staff to provide that one-on-one support. That's a very sort of particular, unique, but you know, kind of like the niche of our academic services. And then, obviously staff support, staff capacity. For us, also ensuring that our staff go to academic trainings and conferences to make sure that they are up to speed with the landscape, the educational landscape, to better support our students. And again, I mentioned the staff meetings, and then also we have a strong orientation for academic staff to understand sort of like the way we do holistic leadership development and also the way we do academic services. So that's also incorporated into, people we bring on board and even beyond to our youth component. I know I kind of sped through things. I only had 5 minutes, but I hope I covered, um, you know, most the gist of what we do here at ICS.
Thank you, Jeanette. I can see that people have got a lot of great questions for you over chat, so I'll let Rachel lift some of those up.
Awesome.
Great. There's a couple questions related to kind of the staff and team you have at ICS. So how many staff does it take to support 88 youth and to do it successfully? And how is your, I think you just spoke a little bit to this, but maybe a little bit more on how your staff is trained and what skills you're looking for in your youth mentors.
Yeah, so we have about 8 staff. 5 of them are youth organizers. 2 of them are academic advisors. It is a big caseload. We prioritize students who are the most active. But across the board, even if you're not an academic advisor, so if you're a youth organizer, we are checking in with students around, their academic support that they need and following up with students. Again, staff, we could definitely could use more staff, and staff capacity is an issue. But also just sort of like the level and intensity of our one-on-one support varies by students. So it's not like all 88 students are getting the very, thorough, in-depth sort of one-on-one support, but we do it sort of at different levels. And then what was the other part of that question? Or was that?
I think you answered the question, or answered it as well as we can in a short amount of time. The other question was around engaging parents. So I want to encourage you to answer that question, and also encourage folks chatting in to talk about different ways they engage parents and caregivers.
Yeah, so with parents, I think the work around college awareness sort of is always ongoing with the parents, especially parents who they themselves didn't go to higher institutions, as we see with a lot of our core leaders. So what we do is through our parent organizing component, they provide the academic sort of like workshops. And that's been one way of engaging parents. Another way is for us to sort of do the one-on-one conversations with parents that we feel we need to engage to better support our students. So we will go ahead and sort of do the more individualized one-on-one, and that's more the advisor. The other thing we've been wanting to do is create do like this sort of open house at ICS, and kind of like this college sort of fair in-house. So that it's open to the community and not just open to our members, not just open to, our parent leaders, but really open to anybody who wants to come and specifically parents and adult and community members who want to learn more about how best they could support their students. And different topics around different topics that we've covered is financial aid, sort of like differentiating between different colleges, you know, sort of what it means to go to college, and also linking that to our vision of better quality of life, right? Like, what does that mean to go to college, and how would that impact the quality of life for your student, but for your family? So yeah.
Great, thank you. And I think we have to move along to close out and try to end close to on time.
Great,
Awesome.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, um, that's an example of one of the learning circles, you know, where you had a group like Inner City Struggle that's developed a really strong practice and shares it with, you know, with a number of other groups in that cohort. And I just want to mention that that kind of learning circle is one that will be one of the projects that we'll be doing with Youth Corps, is developing another set of learning circles. And so, you know, folks should be thinking about both what are the topics that you'd be interested in learning about from other youth organizing groups, and where do you have practices that you'd be interested in sharing with other folks in the field. But so as we close, I want to ask one more question for everybody here, which is, what else could FCYO do to help your organization strengthen a leadership pipeline? So if you have thoughts about that, please put them in the chat. And what we hope that this toolkit will be a valuable resource for your organizations, but we also know that a lot of other things are needed. So what else would your organization need other than this toolkit? And it could be, you know, an online clearinghouse to connect young people graduating from youth organizing groups to opportunities. It could be the kind of alumni tracking system that we've talked about in the past that multiple groups can use, or something else. We'd love your thoughts on what else could you use to support your young people to stay engaged in the social justice movement as they get older and transition out of your work. You know, we believe that the work that you all are doing is just amazing with young people, and we want to find ways to continue to support that and continue to build this pipeline. And so we're continuing to look at what are the contributions that we can make at FCYO past the development of this kind of curriculum, and we'd love your thoughts about that. So if you have thoughts about what else we could do to support the leadership pipeline, you know, send them in the chat, send us emails later on. But I think at this point, I want to just, you know, close out the webinar and just really thank everyone for participating and for sharing all of your thoughts and ideas. We really greatly appreciate this. We're excited to be continuing to work with you all. Again, this is just the first of our Youth Corps webinars, so we will be having another webinar in April. We're still confirming what the topic for that will be, but we'll send something out soon to let you all know about the next webinar. We're also going to be sending out a survey in the next week or so to get your feedback on this webinar, and then also to get your ideas on what other webinars and learning circles you would like, because we really want to know. We want to make these webinars and these learning circles as relevant to your work as possible. So please, you know, think about what other topics you'd like to see, who are presenters that you'd like to hear from, and we'd really like your feedback. But again, so I want to thank you know, Janelle and Rachel from MSC. And Jeanette at ICS. Thank you all so much for sharing all of your wisdom and work. We really greatly appreciate it. And thank all of you who've been on the chat for sharing all of these resources. And again, we really hope that Youth Corps will continue to be a space for you all to share what you're learning, to learn from each other, and we hope we can continue to be a resource for your work. So thank you all so much for participating, and we look forward to the next step. And please let us know how this was for you, what we can do to make it more relevant, and what ideas, and stay in touch. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Great final chats. We're definitely, you know, going to track these final messages that people are sending.